2025, the Georgia Bulldogs finished 51st in total offense. 51st. That's just outside the top 50. So we decided what would happen in 2022 if the Georgia offense was only 51st in the country that year. Could that team have won that national title? We'll do the 21 team as well if you'd like. We were just curious. And so, step one, we had to find out what the 51st team was in 2022. We see that they are averaging 30 points a game. We'll show you the stats, so that they may scroll up there. But that's going to be the number. The 51st team in 2022 scored 30.26, I believe, per game. So we're going to take that number and look at the actual results in 2022, game per game. And what we'll do is that we'll take a look at the actual score, and as you can see, whatever it takes to win that game, we'll take it out of our average, which we're allowed 30 points a game. And we'll look at the score, and if we only need 10 points to win, we'll take 10 and we'll put the 20 points we didn't need into like a bonus point, so we can dig into like a bank account, and we can go through game per game and see if we score enough points to win every game. And we're going to find out. And most of you know we're going to have some extra points to come off out of that championship game where it was 42-41. I wasn't averaging 30, was it? It's going to be fun. Stick with us, and we're going to do it game per game. We're going to take a little time travel and see if Georgia would have won in 2022 with the same offense they had this year. I'm sure you're noticing all those scores that were flashing up there from that actual Georgia team, which finished 5th in the country in offense in 2022. A big difference in authority from 51st in the country. But let's go to the beginning. Oregon. Obviously, 30 points would have been enough to have defeated Oregon. The Dogs won 49-3 in 2022 using the 51st best offense and only averaging 30 points. They could have won that one 30-3. So far so good. Against Samford, 33 points were actually scored. We're only allowed 30. We still beat Samford. South Carolina, 48-7 was what 22 team actually scored. They only scored 30. They still would have won. So far, so good. Georgia Tech, Kent State, 39-22. We still would have won with only 30 points. Georgia, Missouri 26-22 the final. We would have won with 30. So far, so good. 51st offense in the country is doing pretty good. Against Auburn, 42-10 was what the 22 team did. 30 points on that game, would have won handily. So far, so good as well. Now, against Vanderbilt, Georgia 22 team defeated them 55-0. So obviously 30 would have been plenty. So far, it's looking good. Against Florida, 42-20. So 30 points would have been plenty. We haven't had to dig into the bank account yet. In fact, it's hard to keep up with how many bonus points we have. Tennessee, 27-13. That team didn't even get 30 that year. We would have done better. So with the 51st best offense, Georgia would have beaten Mississippi State 30-19 instead of 45-19. So far, the offense hasn't been that important. Now against Kentucky, 16-6 was the actual score. So Georgia would have won if they had 30. So far, who needs an offense? against Georgia Tech, 37-14. The actual score, 30 points would have won handily. Again, who needs an offense? 51st in the country, and we haven't. Oh, wait a minute. Oops. LSU. Georgia actually won 50-30. So what do we do with that one? We'll give it to Georgia. And then against Ohio State, 42-41, and we do not have enough points. Game over. So we don't even get to beat TCU 65-7 because we wouldn't have beat Ohio State. Now, obviously, if you borrow points, you get the point. Without an offense, this Georgia team in 2022 would have been just as well off if they were 51st in the country up to the LSU game. But then it got a little hairy, as you saw. LSU scored 30. If we only averaged 30, who knows if you'd have won that game. That season could have ended right there. And it certainly would have ended. You would have lost to Ohio State. And doesn't that sound a whole lot like what we've been doing the last 2 years? If you took it back to 21, you'd probably see very similar results. I may do a video about that one if you like. I did this as an exercise to see what would happen. And now you have to factor that in with the fact that that was a generational defense that we just compared that to. And even then, the likelihood was you would have died at the SEC. Very good chance. You only averaged 30, and LSU had 30. It's apples and oranges and water over the bridge, but the point should have soaked in by now. If you don't have a dominant offense, those championships, they just don't show up quite as often, if they ever do, in fact, at all. So that was our little lesson today on how important is an offense. Now, can you imagine how many arguments people would have thrown at you if you criticized an offense that was 51st in the country in 22, like we just had a little make-believe? But they won most of their games. They didn't have any trouble until they got to the LSU and the SEC. But don't you notice there's a little pattern there? That's when you need an offense to win the big games. The ones that put you over the top. The ones that make the season memorable. 51st rated offense in 2022 for Georgia would probably have been another disappointing season for Georgia. Let that soak in. Now, we're going to be entering this coming season. Now, we don't know if we're going to be 51st, but we don't know if we might be 75th. We might be a little better. But that team in 2022 was the 5th best offense in the country. 41 points a game was the average. But you saw, sometimes they piled on better than that. I'm not saying Georgia needs to always have the 5th best offense in the country. But they certainly aren't going to win any titles with the 51st best offense in the country. And so that's all I got to say about that. Don't you think we need to take a look, and let's certainly hope we're not going to have the 51st best offense next year. It doesn't look like there's anything changed, except we got newer quarterbacks and new receivers, and the same coaches that couldn't even make that get in the top 50. Doesn't look good. All that could change. Georgia needs to immediately go back to back in the old days. Bear Bryant, in the middle of the summer, jumped his offense because he knew it wasn't going to work, and went to the wishbone and won a title, or he may have won it next year. Changed the program's trajectory and saved a legend. And that's where Georgia's at. They could take a look at that offense and go, you know what? We got to get back to what we did in 22. And if the people that's here getting paid can't do that, they don't need to have the whole season figure out they're in the wrong place.